It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. Scotland are out of the Euros after Hungary score with almost the last kick of the match to send the Tartan army home from Germany. Disappointment for thousands of Scotland fans. We'll have the latest live from Glasgow and Germany. The election betting scandal, another Conservative official under investigation as the gambling watchdog widens its inquiry. Flights resume from Manchester Airport after a power cut caused chaos and cancellations for thousands of passengers. Israeli forces are accused of using a wounded Palestinian man as a human shield after tying him to the bonnet of their Jeep. Plus, a heat wave and a health warning. After a wet spring, temperatures are due to soar across the country. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30. Good evening. It could have been the moment Scotland made history. A win against Hungary at the Euros would have pushed the national team past the group stages of a major international championship for the very first time. But it wasn't to be. A last-minute goal meant the hopes of the Tartan army in Stuttgart and watching from home were dashed. Well, let's take you live to Stuttgart now and our sport correspondent, Rob Harris. Rob, it seems so cruel.
Yeah, the Scotland fans leaving the stadium now here in Stuttgart, absolutely devastated to see their Euros campaign end, leaving with just the 1 point. They were so close to keeping their hopes alive by securing a 0-0 draw, but then in the 100th minute, conceding that goal to Kevin Csoboth, he was the end of a breakaway by Hungary as Scotland were trying to get their own winner, and then the stadium erupted in celebrations, and the fans around me now are blaming Steve Clarke, the manager, believing he perhaps didn't get the best out of these players. This was a tournament that began for them with a 5-1 hammering by Germany in the opening match. Then the second game of the group, they turned it around to at least get a point against Switzerland. It was going to be a precious point, it seemed. But when it came to the crunch in this final Group A game, they didn't have enough. They barely threatened the Hungary goal at all. And as they did try to push for a winner, it was to their cost, because that's when Hungary launched their own attack forward to claim the winner and to keep their own hopes of progressing in the Euros alive. It ended here in Stuttgart with Hungary beating Scotland 1-0, and also there was a distressing moment in the second half. There was a collision involving Angus Gunn, the Scotland goalkeeper, with Kevin Csoboth. But it was a day that began with so much optimism for Scotland fans. Before you saw the Scotland fans, you could hear them. This Tartan takeover transforming Stuttgart from the usual Sunday slumber.
We know we ain't no Argentina!
Would this be the awakening of the nation, finally at a Euros? Could they be the first Scots to qualify for a knockout stage? It took Angus Gunn to ensure they didn't fall behind early on to Hungary, as they lived dangerously, never producing a shot of their own in the first half. Anxious viewing back in Glasgow, they could barely watch. Gunn's saves were keeping them in it. Then this attempted clearance and collision caused concern. There was distress in the stadium, but the game continued. And then came the blow for Scotland as Callum McGregor was attempting to win it. The Hungarians launched their own counter-attack, and this is how it ended, with the winner in the 100th minute, Kevin Csoboth, completing it to send the Hungarian fans into rapturous celebrations, knowing that their hopes of progressing are alive again. They're off the mark. They'd lost both of their opening games, to Germany after losing to Switzerland, but claiming the win in the 100th minute with the final kick of the game keeps them in it. There will be, though, deep concern amongst the Hungarians as we wait to discover word on their Barnabas Varga after that collision with Angus Gunn, the Scotland goalkeeper. There was huge distress inside the stadium as he was treated for many minutes on the pitch. It's why 10 minutes was added on at the end of the game, and we have no word on his condition. But on the pitch, it finished Scotland 1. It finished Scotland 0, Hungary 1, and the Scotland fans are now preparing to go home at the end of yet another tournament when they've failed, as every other time in their history, to make it out of the group and to reach the knockout phase.
Rob, I think there's some wishful thinking there in that slip-up. Let's go to Ashna Hurigneg now, who's in Glasgow with the fans. I suspect they are not in the best of moods.
Heartbreak for the Tartan Army here in Glasgow. 800 people came out to support them, and they watched that devastating minute in the last few minutes or so, including this family who spoke to you earlier. Give me a sense of how you're feeling.
There's no words. There's absolutely no words. Just, we absolutely love the Tartan Army, love Scotland team, and we are absolutely devastated that they never made it. That last goal, do you know, there should have been a penalty. We should have had it. We played so well the majority of the game. We should have had it.
We were speaking earlier, you were out in Germany and you were so looking forward to going back. And bless your heart, you came out with tears down your face. Talk to me about what this means to you right now. It's a shock, I imagine.
Yeah, I think it's just more like it's my first time properly going abroad with the Scotland team and seeing them play abroad, and like just being to be a part of that Tartan Army experience and being a part of the full team abroad and seeing what it's like and experiencing it all is just, it's just something that everyone wants to experience when they're young, and it's something that I will live for the rest of my life.
And remembering a moment like this, I suppose, you guys were watching it inside.
Absolutely gutted. Absolutely gutted. Absolutely. They tried so hard. They really did try.
That last goal should have been a penalty. Scotland should have got a goal.
And in the last few minutes, we saw them trying and trying again. They were really pushing.
They really tried.
They tried so hard,
They
but
tried.
that last goal should never been a goal.
Just a final word from you. What do you think that the Tartan Army does now? What does Scotland do now?
And we move on and we follow them all the road, all again. We do it always again. Absolutely, 100%. Scotland, we love you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Couldn't have put it better myself. Well, best of luck with the next round. Thank you so much. There is a real sense of disappointment, gutted. Many of those fans are gutted. 800 people packed out in here. This is only 2 miles away from Hampden Park, and it looks very likely now that those Scotland players will be boarding the flight back here to Glasgow tomorrow from Germany.
OK. Ashna, thank you. It's the political scandal which polls suggest is cutting through with voters. Tonight, a fourth Conservative Party official is under investigation by the Gambling Commission over bets placed just days before the election date was revealed. Sky News understands the watchdog is now widening its inquiry, with many more people likely to be implicated. Our chief political correspondent, John Craig, reports.
Rishi Sunak gambled on a July election. Now a betting scandal means the odds are shortening on a heavy Tory defeat. And Sky News understands the Gambling Commission is now investigating many more people than the Conservatives already named over allegations of betting on the date of the election. Nick Mason, the Conservative Party's chief data officer, is the latest Tory facing an inquiry. Senior cabinet ministers are hiding behind the investigation by the Gambling Commission.
Well, I'm not in any way going to defend people that placed bets on that. There is an investigation by the Gambling Commission, and we have been, told very, very clearly that we are not to discuss the investigation.
You're confident, by the way, that none of your colleagues was involved in any of this? Your cabinet colleagues?
Well, as I say, I've got no reason to believe any of them were at all.
But Labour is calling on the Gambling Commission to name names. In a letter to Chief Executive Andrew Rhodes, the party's campaign chief, Pat McFadden, wrote, I believe it's in the public interest that the Gambling Commission makes public the names of other figures you're investigating relating to this matter. There will be particular interest in whether any government ministers bet on the date of the election before it was called. Mr Mason, who's also a Herefordshire County councillor, denies wrongdoing.
But Sky News also understands that as well as looking at more people, the Gambling Commission is also investigating whether people with insider knowledge asked a third party to place a bet for them. And it's written to bookmakers asking for any details of bets over £20 on the date of the general election.
Cabinet Minister Michael Gove has likened the gambling controversy to the Partygate scandal involving Boris Johnson. A claim also made by the Liberal Democrats.
I think for many people it will remind them of the Partygate times, where it was one rule for them and one rule for everybody else.
An opinion poll has suggested the Tory betting scandal is the story voters have noticed the most in the past few days. These voters in Hertfordshire endorsed that.
It's immoral. They should have been suspended, definitely, without a doubt.
It's very devious, and I know politicians aren't exactly the most honest people.
I think it's absolutely disgraceful. Again, it shows the dishonesty of the politicians that we have today.
Mr Sunak spent part of Sunday at a junior park run, but the betting scandal may be costly in the race for number 10. John Craig, Sky News.
To southern Russia now, where 2 attackers involved in a series of shootings have been shot dead. Authorities say the gunmen opened fire in the region of Dagestan, attacking people in 3 separate locations: a synagogue, an Orthodox church and a police post. 9 people were killed and 25 others were injured, as our Moscow correspondent Ivor Bennett reports.
Late evening in southern Russia and multiple attacks. The targets, places of worship in the North Caucasus region of Dagestan. In the ancient city of Derbent, smoke filled the sky. According to officials, a synagogue and a church were both set alight. An Orthodox priest is reportedly among the dead, as well as several police officers. The gunmen are said to have been armed with automatic weapons before making their escape. Not long later, another town, another attack. This time, a police post in Makhachkala. Fights reportedly erupted in the streets, and gunfire rang out long into the night as law enforcement agencies moved in.
In order to ensure the safety of citizens, stop terrorist crimes and detain people involved in an armed attack, the head of the Russian FSB department for the Republic of Dagestan decided to conduct a counter-terrorist operation.
This video claims to show one of the gunmen being detained at the beach nearby as crowds flee the drama. It's being reported on Russian media they were followers of an international terrorist organisation. And according to local officials, 4 gunmen were eliminated. But it's not clear whether any remain. Ivor Bennett, Sky News, Moscow.
Flights have resumed this evening from Manchester Airport after a significant power cut left thousands of passengers stranded. The airport's chief executive has apologised, but warned some disruption could continue into tomorrow. Charlotte Leeming reports.
Caused by an electrical outage.
At Manchester Airport, hundreds of passengers departure ready, but with nowhere to go. Confusion and chaos as people queued at airport desks inside, others waited outside, and all of them facing the same problem. Joshua Bridges and his family were meant to be travelling to Turkey.
20 minutes before boarding we were told that we're not boarding now and it's fully cancelled and there'll be nothing leaving here to go to Turkey. Bags everywhere, there's absolutely thousands, you can't get a seat, and we're now getting asked to leave the airport now.
All flights out of the 2 main terminals were cancelled this morning after a significant power cut. The airport urged passengers travelling from the terminals to stay away until further notice, but it did little for those already there. Lindsay Mitchell from Sheffield had also been due to fly to Turkey for her family summer holiday, a trip she's been looking forward to for a year.
You've got to make the best of a bad situation. It's not the airline's fault. It's not the Manchester Airport's fault. It's no one's fault. It's just one of them freaky things that happen in everyday life.
Power at the airport has been restored, but baggage and security systems are continuing to be affected. The airport's managing director has apologised for the disruption.
Unfortunately, two critical systems to do with our baggage systems, screening people's hold baggage, and our security systems didn't come back up. And as a result, in Terminal 1 and Terminal 2, we weren't able to be able to depart flights.
It's not just outbound flights that are being disrupted. People wanting to get back to the UK are also being affected. It's a miserable and frustrating start for holidaymakers, with the hope that normal operations will resume tomorrow. Charlotte Leeming, Sky News, Manchester.
Israel has said it will investigate after video emerged of Israeli soldiers driving through the occupied West Bank with an injured Palestinian man strapped to the bonnet of their Jeep. A United Nations official accused the soldiers of using the wounded man as a human shield after the raid in the city of Jenin. Our Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkle is in Jerusalem for us. And Alistair, what do we know about what happened before this video was taken?
Well, this was during an Israeli military operation in the city of Jenin. The Israeli military have carried out many operations in Jenin, particularly the refugee camp in a section of the city last year, but also since October the 7th. The Israelis go in because they say that they're going in to target suspected terrorists who are hiding inside the refugee camp to try and arrest them or often kill them before any terror attack takes place. It can and often does end up in prolonged fighting between the two sides. This happened after the latest operation in Jenin. The man was caught up, or as a part of the fighting, he was injured by the Israeli military, and so they put him onto the front, onto the bonnet of a heavily armoured vehicle in order to try and drive him to Palestinian medics. What they didn't do is ask the Palestinian Red Crescent or local doctors to come and treat him there and to take him to hospital. And so the Israeli military, now that this video has gone around the world, has released a response saying that this incident by the soldiers was in violation of orders and standard operating procedures. The suspect was taken by the forces while tied on top of a vehicle. The conduct of the forces in the video of the incident does not conform to the values of the IDF. The incident will be investigated and dealt with accordingly. Critics of the Israelis and the way they carry out their conduct in the West Bank will say that this is just the latest example of misconduct by Israeli forces in the West Bank towards Palestinians. And they will also say that if you look at the record of the Israeli military or Israeli judicial authorities investigating Israeli actions in the West Bank, it normally amounts to nothing.
So thank you. Russian authorities say 6 people have died and more than 100 others have been injured in a Ukrainian drone attack. Video shown on Russian state TV captures what sounds like explosions as people run for cover on a beach in Sevastopol. It comes on the second day of Russia's aerial bombing campaign of Kharkiv in northeastern Ukraine. The Saudi health minister has confirmed that more than 1,300 people have died during this year's pilgrimage to Hajj because of extreme temperatures at the holy site. Officials in Cairo suggest more than half of the fatalities were people from Egypt. Many had not registered as pilgrims with the Saudi Arabian government. They ignored us and made us feel insignificant. The words of a survivor of the Stardust nightclub fire after the Irish state finally led a ceremony to remember the victims more than 40 years after they died. 48 people lost their lives at the packed nightclub on Valentine's Day night when a blaze tore through the venue. Our Ireland correspondent Stephen Murphy reports.
As the night fills with laughter, some families mourn, and the 48 children that never came home.
Poignant, powerful and decades overdue.
William McDermott, Willie, a gentle giant with a beautiful smile.
This was a contrite Irish state finally paying proper tribute to the victims and their families that it had failed for so long.
And you can be proud that due to your perseverance, your resilience, and above all, your love, that we as a nation and as a state finally, publicly, commemorate them with you today. Marin Gro de Jo. Love lives forever. Gurmila Magov.
48 young people were killed and 200 injured when fire tore through the Stardust nightclub in the early hours of St. Valentine's Day 1981. For decades, the families fought for answers, furious that arson was initially suggested as a cause. In April this year, a coroner's inquest finally found all 48 had been unlawfully killed. The fire caused by an electrical fault. A state apology soon followed, and then today's commemoration. But today is not the final chapter in this story. Survivors want to see details of a new compensation scheme, and most importantly, they say they want a new police inquiry.
We were unlawfully killed, and there has to be a criminal investigation, and somebody has to be held responsible for the deaths of 48. I know it's 43 years, but we still want somebody held accountable for the deaths of our loved ones.
A spokesperson for the Gardaí, the Irish Police Service, told us that the 2 investigation files are currently being re-examined, but that work is still ongoing. So it may be some time yet before these families get any kind of sense about whether there will be a fresh criminal investigation. It's taken decades to come this far, but the Stardust families know their battle is not yet over. Stephen Murphy, Sky News in Dublin.
Time now to get all the latest sports news from Julia.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
Amy James Turner's career has taken her from youth football in Yorkshire to the North West, Liverpool, Manchester United, then a season in the NWSL with Orlando Pride, to North London, where Amy helped Tottenham make history in the Women's FA Cup, reaching the final of the competition for the very first time. Not content with having impact on the pitch, Amy's also doing so off it, representing and driving the voice of women's football on climate.
Hey Amy, how you doing?
Good, thanks.
Hang on, you didn't tell me about this. Bringing a portable friend along. Who's this?
Betsy comes everywhere with me, so she wanted to come and meet you, David.
Oh, come on. All right, listen, great season for Spurs. How's it been?
Yeah, it's been a great season, like you said. So many ups and downs, but so pleased with where we are this season compared to where we were last season. So, yeah, really happy.
So you've done this report. Tell me, what was the process and who did you speak to?
You know how I've been using my voice to promote sustainability initiatives, and yeah, I'm really passionate about this space, and I thought, how do other players in the game feel about this? You know I spark conversations in the dressing room, and I know it's very much me starting these conversations, but I felt like there was an interest there, and you know, women's football, there's so many great advocates in the game, and I thought, you know, I'll have a chat to my teammates, I'll see what they're thinking, where could we go with this?
It's starting to rain.
Yes,
I think we need some coffee. Shall we go?
Yeah,
let's go and meet some new players then.
113 surveys completed, 36 clubs represented, 10 in-depth interviews and 3 close friends and colleagues here with Amy to give the stories behind the stats.
So how do you think climate change and the issues of climate change is affecting playing conditions on the field?
I'll never forget when I was over in the US, I was in Seattle at the time, and there was really bad air pollution, and you know, the orange sky, yeah, it was just crazy conditions to be playing, and you're driving to the game, you can barely see. You know, the government put out messages for everyone to stay home and not exercise outside, and then there's us driving to matches, and the game was going ahead. And the solution from the league was to put oxygen tanks on the sideline and to have break every 15 minutes in the match, and the 15-minute increments like absolutely killed me. Got used to it, got used to having these like mini breaks through the season, and then as soon as we got back to playing a whole match and 45-minute halves, it felt like the longest game ever.
I can't even imagine as a coach preparing your team for 15-minute break, like every 15-minute breaks, because can you imagine what the momentum that does to the game? But I remember when we were in Louisville on pre-season tour, and some of our players were overheating because we were playing at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and the humidity was so high.
If you're playing in these extreme heats and you're a high-pressing team, okay, maybe you can't do that at these extreme temperatures. We want to put on a show of women's football that's exciting to watch, and if you're looking sluggish, if you're not playing at your best, it's not a good representation of the game. Exactly.
Yeah. Being in England, we've obviously experienced extreme weather, but probably
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
After the wettest spring on record, some of the UK's highest temperatures so far this year are finally on the way. A yellow heat health alert has been issued for most of England, with the thermometer predicted to soar past 30 degrees. Laura Bundock has more.
It's heating up. The sun's finally out, and so are families. The blue skies a feast for the eyes. After one of the wettest springs on record, they're making the most of it here in Ashridge.
Well, I work on a building site, so we had to change our plans every day. But it's nice to actually get out and do something in the heat.
It's getting better now, but who knows for how long, that's the problem.
It's nice to be out in the great outdoors.
With the rosé in your hand?
Yeah, well, that helps.
The warmer weather's good for business, and a crowd pleaser too. And this is just the beginning. Temperatures are rising from Monday, with east and southeastern England possibly hitting 28 degrees, while northeast Scotland and Northern Ireland could reach 25. On Tuesday, the warmest temperatures are in the southeast, with London the likely hotspot. By Wednesday, it could be as hot as 31 degrees in some areas. And come Thursday, even warmer, with the mercury nudging 32. This warmer weather might feel welcome, but as the mini heatwave hits, it brings warnings and a heat health alert for most of England. Globally, weather is changing. After the UK's recent rain and extreme heat across much of Europe, for climate scientists, it's all a worry.
In the UK, you will see lots of pictures of people at the beach enjoying themselves, having barbecues, and you'll have adverts for those sort of things. However, we know that people that are over the age of 65, infants and children, pregnant women and outdoor workers often see an increase in those people going to hospital in the UK during the heatwave.
The risks of extreme weather are real, but finally, for some, a taste of the summer we've all been craving. Laura Bundock, Sky News, Ashridge in Hertfordshire.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by barrister and former government minister Anna Soubry and the assistant editor at The Spectator, Cindy Yu. Amongst the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front of the Financial Times. Their headline, Conservatives lose a third of their voters since January, survey finds. We'll be right back with that story and others. Do stay with us.
I'm Adam Parsons. I'm Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Brussels.
More flares going off, a volley of rocks, cobbles have been pulled up
out and are being used as missiles to hurl at these police. We take you to the heart of stories that shape our world. We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news. We have now left Italy and entered France. Nobody's asked to check our identity. Made by people who dare to challenge.
Nice to see you again, Mr. Barnier. Why?
Meeting you. Fishing does have the potential to stymie an enormous economic deal. What strikes you when you come to this glacier is not just the way in which the environment is changing, but the speed at which those changes are happening.
It's devastating, actually.
Welcome back. You're watching Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. Heartbreak for Scotland as they crash out of the Euros after Hungary score a winner in the 100th minute. Another top Conservative official is under investigation for allegedly betting on the date of the general election as the gambling watchdog widens its inquiry. And flights have resumed at Manchester Airport after a power cut caused chaos with thousands of passengers delayed. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with barrister and former government minister Anna Soubry and the assistant editor at The Spectator, Cindy Yu. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. The FT has a survey which shows that the Tories have lost up to a third of their electoral support since January, with Reform the biggest beneficiary. According to the Eye, senior Tories are questioning Rishi Sunak's leadership after his resistance to calls to act on the growing election day betting scandal. That story is also the lead item in tomorrow's Guardian. The Mail says Mr Sunak will warn in a speech tomorrow there are now just 10 days to save the country from what he calls the disaster of a Labour government. The Telegraph reports that Labour would tear up Conservative guidance on teaching about sex and gender in schools. The Times said they'd also cut down on the paperwork needed for people to legally change gender. With a 30-degree heat wave looming, the Metro has warnings from the Met Office and Health Security Agency that vulnerable people will be at increased risk. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by barrister and former Government Minister Anna Soubry and the assistant editor at The Spectator, Cindy Yu. Welcome to you both. Let's start with the front page of the I newspaper, where we read that Conservatives are questioning, at this point, Rishi Sunak's leadership. Anna, for why?
Because I think it's mainly because the two candidates haven't been suspended. The two that are under investigation, obviously, well, I was going to say they both deny doing anything wrong, but of course one of them, Craig Williams, has actually said he made a gross error of judgment, which rather indicates that he's admitted that he's placed a bet on. But in any event, what would normally happen, and that's why now this is becoming a very serious problem for Rishi Sunak, is in any organisation, if somebody was under investigation, and especially for something as serious as this, and the money might be small, but it's so obvious that this is so bad, that you'd be suspended from your position. And Sunak has failed for some reason to suspend these two candidates. Now, once you're on the ballot paper, you'll remember we were talking earlier about the Rochdale by-election. Do you remember how the Labour candidate done something hideous and before he'd even had it imposed by being elected, basically he was thrown out of the party, for want of a better expression. And what people are saying is that these two candidates should have been suspended. Now, they're still on the ballot paper, because once you're on the ballot paper, you can't come off it. But obviously, it sends out a huge message to the electorate in those constituencies. And I don't understand, for the love of me, I just don't understand why Sunak hasn't done this. And there's a growing chorus now, ex-ministers, presumably current Conservative candidates, people who were members of Parliament seeking re-election, really calling into question Rishi Sunak's leadership, as if it hasn't been disastrous enough since this election was called. I mean, you just can't make this up.
Well, Cindy, the Prime Minister is saying that he's waiting for any conclusion of an investigation, or the investigation that's ongoing. And if there has been found any wrongdoing, then he will boot whoever out of the Conservative Party.
Yes, absolutely. But, I mean, that's a classic line of defence, isn't it? Innocent until proven guilty. But as Anna says, in this case, one of them has already apologised, suggesting that he did do the thing he was accused of. And when it comes to this particularly sensitive election period, you really have to think about what benefit you're getting from keeping these people on, as opposed to what you're costing yourself, because candidates are getting this on the doorstep.
Yes.
This is one of those issues that's really, really cutting through.
Yes.
Going back to earlier in the election campaign, the D-Day stuff as well. These are the events, the stories that everyone will hear about, even if they don't follow leaders' question time or the latest debate or whatever it is. So you really have to think, this is almost a week now in the running for this story. What does Rishi Sunak still gain from keeping these people on board? Unfortunately, it's already gone on for too long, so that I think he's already taken some damage in the polls. But it really needs to be nipped in the bud. I think what's horrifying as well is, as Anna says, the amount of money here is tiny, which shows to me that they're not doing this for profit, but they're probably doing this, if it's true at all, they're doing this because they've mentally checked out. The election is a bit of a joke rather than a life and death situation, or a fight for the future of the party. It's just people seem to be mentally
something
checked
to have
out.
a flutter on.
Yes, exactly. And so I think it's a symptom of the state of the party, and of course Rishi Sunak's critics is a symptom of his weaknesses as a leader, that they see this kind of indecisiveness or feet dragging, when actually quicker action probably would have nipped this in the bud a bit.
And critics within the party, according to the I1 former minister, joined calls for the Prime Minister to act now, describing the situation as disgrace. Another candidate and former MP accused him of having no backbone. So within his own party, he's been really heavily criticised.
Yes.
Let's move on to the Financial Times. And this survey saying that Conservatives lose a third of their voters. They've lost a third of their voters since January. Anna.
Yes, so the FT has got this story on the front page about a survey which involves 16,000 voters who they've tracked over this period of time since January. I mean, I don't know the demography of those 16,000. We've got to assume that they're a good cross-section right across the United Kingdom, so you can see these movements. And what it says is, gosh, here's a surprise, a third of Conservative voters, i.e. people who said in January they would vote Conservative, they've lost them. And what it shows that more recently is that Reform is picking up the biggest gains. I mean, to be fair, it also says that Labour have lost votes, though not overall, of course, because people have moved over to Labour. So it's just really, in a way, more of the same, isn't it? And of course, the only poll that counts is the one on July the 4th. It also shows, by the way, I think very interestingly, is that a lot of people are going to vote tactically. And they will vote tactically. They'll vote, voters will vote Lib Dem in seats where that's the best candidate to oust the Conservative, and Lib Dems will vote Labour in those seats where it's the best vote to oust the Conservative.
Cindy, any surprises for you in this survey?
I think the extent of the loss is a surprise. Since January, we're not talking about in the last 2 years that the Conservatives have lost votes, since Liz Truss, or the economy has been, struggling to recover. But since January, this is the last 5 months where Rishi Sunak has been planning, everyone's been getting onto election footing. There was a period of time before where Rishi Sunak was more popular than the Conservative Party itself, but it seems like they've dragged him down rather than the other way around.
That's when he was dishy-rishy, was it?
Right, yeah. I mean, those glorious days of being the Chancellor who handed out furlough are long gone now. And so the fact that they're still losing voters this year, I think it is just not... this is the understatement of the century, is not what they want to see. But the fact that it's so recent, I think, is shocking. And I think that contributes to everything we've been talking about. People inside the party, whether it's supporters or politicians, really panicking and feeling like, either panicking or just checking out, because it just doesn't seem like anything's turning this tide.
And yes, in the Daily Mail, Anna, we have Rishi Sunak saying that 10 days left to stop disaster of a Starmer supermajority.
Yes. Now, you see, I think this is fascinating, because normally you'd have expected the Daily Mail's headline to be 10 days left to stop a Starmer socialist Labour government. But no, this headline is to stop a supermajority. So I think they've conceded Labour is going to win. And this is very much now the new attack line from Conservative headquarters, which is, look, we're not going to win. So what the hell are we going to do? Because it really looks like there is a tide that's growing that is going to be so big it's going to wipe out a huge number of Conservative seats. So now the only thing they can cling on to is to say, stop a supermajority. And it's a line, it's nothing more than that. Because from what I'm getting back from talking to people who are knocking on doors on the doorstep, still a lot of people undecided yet. So still quite a lot to play for. This is just a line. In desperation, that's how bad the situation is.
But that's what Rishi Sunak has been saying up until this point, that there is still everything to play for. Do you see this headline as him conceding?
Well, the thing is, he hasn't been able to get behind this headline until get behind this message until now. I mean, earlier last week, Grant Shapps has already been talking about this. CCHQ did also start talking about this. Only for Rishi Sunak the day after, on Wednesday earlier this week, to say no, we can still win. It was, as Anna said, it's still all to play for. So I think the Prime Minister is undecided whether or not he wants this message, which is by definition defeatist. So it's hardly encouraging. At the same time, what's interesting was that there was a poll out over the weekend that showed that actually this message is getting through to those undecided voters who are worried about an unchecked, massive Labour majority. And that's being reflected in the polls. So I think it's actually, even though it's so defeatist, I'm intrigued to see how much it really does cut through.
So if you're somebody who normally votes Conservative and now you're undecided, for reasons which viewers will be well familiar with, of course, and you're thinking, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. Remember, the postal votes have hit, so people have got those postal votes, often sitting up on the mantelpiece, not really quite knowing what to do. You're absolutely right. For those wavering Tories, this is what they're gambling on now. Those wavering Tories will think, oh, better stop this supermajority, even if I don't know really what it is, and I'll vote Conservative, just in case.
But I think they have to stick to it, not the dithering and wavering that we've seen this week, where Rishi Sunak basically undermined Grant Shapps trying to put this message over. They have to stick to one message.
Yeah. Well, we thought that Grant Shapps had actually gone off message and he wasn't supposed to say that.
I think he got the message early.
I think CCHQ had previously, the night before, sent out some communication that seemed very similar to this as well.
But Rishi didn't get the message.
No.
Maybe he got the message and didn't like... I mean, it's not good,
It's not a nice message.
It comes back to, that backbone from the eye that's on the front page there, that he doesn't seem to have a backbone. I mean, I just think it's more that he just looks like a teenager who's just at the wrong party. You know?
Not in the wrong party.
Not in it. At the wrong,
at the wrong
party.
party.
Oh, I'm at the wrong party. Oh, no. I think I'd just go home. Actually, I'd just go to California. But anyway, there we go.
Let's just quickly speak about this story regarding Labour in the Daily Telegraph. They could ditch guidelines banning children from being taught there are more than 2 genders. This has been suggested by a shadow minister. Cindy.
Well, I think Bridget Phillipson, the Shadow Education Secretary, has failed to kind of rule out scrapping this guideline firmly enough. And this basically shows that Labour is still in a tricky position over the gender debate. Keir Starmer has started to talk a little bit more on the gender critical side. You know, ever since the Cass review, it doesn't feel like the mainstream opinion has changed, where, you know, they are able to say women are women and women have vaginas or whatever it is. But the Labour Party itself is still dithering, it seems to be, on actual policy. And so the Conservative Party, you know, earlier this year, Julia Keegan put in this guideline. And I think it was a bit of a trap, you know, to see what Labour would say about it. And we see now that that trap is working for some people, you know, in the sense that Labour have failed to rule out scrapping this guideline. Earlier this week, J.K. Rowling came out and said that she wouldn't trust women's rights with the Labour Party. So none of it, I don't think, is enough to overturn this tide, but it will certainly put some people off voting for the party.
I thought
10 seconds.
Sorry, what she said to Trevor Phillips was spot on, actually. And what she's saying is we've got to get the balance right, recognising that trans people are human beings and they shouldn't be vilified and politicised in exactly the way that you've just described. It is shocking, but at the same time, being sensible. And of course, a woman is somebody with a cervix and a vagina and doesn't have a willy.
Anna and Cindy, thank you so much. Ending on that point, we're going to take a break. Coming up, this on the front of the Metro, forecasting a heat wave lasting the whole week as temperatures are predicted to soar to 30 degrees. Stay with us for more.
Well, I think Rebecca clearly was telling the truth. And I think what's fascinating about her, she was an intelligent woman and felt for some months after she was fired, because of various aspects which she described in the book, that she'd been very badly treated. That was all set up. He was in Spain, flown in deliberately to stage a lovely thing. Victoria, gripped him iron grip on his hand, so he whispered to him, "Smile, smile." Then they went into the chalet, and a journalist looked through the window and saw her hitting him in the face and him not responding. I mean, what is remarkable about that loose episode is not the affair, because there were many affairs in Beckham's life, but that the steely determination by Victoria to keep the show on the road. I mean, she is remarkable in that way of self-interest and understanding that the brand depended on both of them, that the family was important to project. And on the other hand, with the tabloid journalists at News of the World and everyone else, who, having been fed this diet of a happy family, suddenly saw the hypocrisy and were alarmed and outraged by the denials and threats by the Beckham's lawyers not to reveal the truth. So it was a great story at the time.
I felt that ire as well, let me tell you.
You did. I mean, your interview was sensational and, of course, outraged the Beckhams and their people.
You choose to talk about it for what reason?
Because people are calling me a liar and calling me names and you know, and at the end of the day, these are the facts. This is what happened. This is the truth, and I shouldn't be ashamed of it. You know, I was wrong. It's wrong to. I was wrong to have done what I did. I know that, but it did happen, and I'm not going to live with a lie for the rest of my life.
They are the second most important family in Britain after the Prince and Princess of Wales. They live by manipulating the media. They are icons. He's a role model. She constantly thrusts herself into the public eye, as he does too. And my criteria for all my books, this is my 27th, and my biographies, is always to choose those people who climb up the greasy pole and fight to maintain their status and power and wealth by crushing their victims and, in the end, inventing their own narrative.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, barrister and former government minister Anna Soubry and the assistant editor at The Spectator, Cindy Hugh. Now let's take a look at the front page of The Guardian. Look at those faces. The sadness, so cruel. The timing in the 100th minute. They were almost there, Anna.
That's football. I mean, I know you could say it's most sport, but, you know, the 100th minute, that 10 minutes of extra time, and Hungary go and put one in the back of the net, and that is the end of it for Scotland. They're out of the Euros. Because if they'd got... I think they only needed a draw, and then they would have been through.
Yeah.
They would have been one of the best thirds or whatever. But they would have gone through for the first time, I think.
In their history, yeah.
So it is deeply... I mean, it's just really sad. I mean, as you know, Gillian, she's laughing. She's being horrible. Because I love football. But, I mean, I know you've been following as well. I'm sure you would if you could. But this is... these are the things, when you think, oh, we're home and dry, we're all right. Then you go, oh, hang on, we've got another 2 minutes. Anything can happen. Thinking they were there in that last minute and they lose.
It is just the timing that's so cruel, isn't it, Cindy?
It is cruel.
Yeah. Well, Michael Gove earlier this week was saying about the Conservative Party, you know, we haven't gone into Fergie time yet, which I had later read up was about Alex Ferguson's, you know, tendency to pull out something like this. But, you know, on the Scots in the last, as you say, it is very sad. Yeah.
Yeah.
And presumably they'll all have to come, most of them will come home now.
Yeah.
Because the supporters have been fabulous.
The Tartan Army, yes. They're legendary for their partying, aren't they?
They are. And I think they've behaved and conducted themselves exceedingly well. And I think they've won a lot of hearts. And the rendition, I didn't see it because I was obviously coming here, but the rendition of Flower of Scotland, apparently, which is their anthem at the beginning of the game, was apparently not a dry eye in the house. It was so moving.
Very sad. Very sad. But some good news of a sort. The temperatures are rising. We might have a summer for at least a couple of days, a heat wave next week. Metro front page.
A British summer for at least 3 days. First 30 degrees Celsius this year. So be the hottest we've had, and as all viewers know, it's been unseasonably cold throughout, you know,
and wet.
The whole of this year, and wet, exactly.
Wet.
And so there's another story inside the Metro, I think, about Glastonbury goers later this week who are going to be met with this heat wave and then a thunderstorm.
Yeah.
So having had such a wet time, so I think, you know, they need to bring their wellies for sure. But, you know, this is so exciting.
But on the serious side, there is a risk of death warning. The Metro
yes, and it said people over the age of 65, so obviously I shall be watching myself. But in all seriousness, yes, when you get temperatures of that level, at 30 degrees and over, then there will be a lot of people concerned. But I do notice it says head for the northeast. I'm assuming the northeast includes Scotland, which means a double whammy for the Scots, because it doesn't seem they're not coming home to any heat either. But yeah, that's your British summer, 3 days, and then back to normal, rain.
I really hope
gloom.
that's not true. We're just joking.
We'll see. And let's just finish off on this story, the front page of the Financial Times, and the US is preparing to ban the TikTok app.
No, this was her choice, the TikTok. Sorry.
Take it away.
Forgive me. It's just that Lillian knows more about this.
No, I write about China for The Spectator as well, and this is such a big company. We know China's probably most successful technology export in the world. And TikTok is facing a divestment ban, basically. So the American government had basically said that its mother company has either to divest TikTok to American ownership or basically be banned in the US, and they have until January. And so what we're seeing this story is saying is that advertisers, because TikTok has become so lucrative for so many influencers and companies and politicians even, the advertisers are now looking at alternatives. But I think, frankly, there's not going to really be an alternative to TikTok for a long time. You know, the algorithm just has that magical mix. And, you know, as we've seen in the British election, so many politicians have made use of it. So I think basically this is just going to show that the corporates are adapting to this new ecosystem. But we'll have to see if this actually goes through. Divestment might happen, or ban might happen. We don't really know quite yet.
Do you think that it's leaning towards a ban? Is that really a realistic prospect?
Well, you know, there are people close to the Biden administration who have business interests in certain areas like this. They would love to have TikTok as their own company. I'm not saying that is the reason why this has happened, but there are certainly interests there. Of course, the big thing to your question is the American election coming up later this year, because Donald Trump has actually become more pro-TikTok in his years outside of government. Very big surprise there, and has, you know, had a lot of people scratching their heads why this China hawk has become so pro-TikTok. So we'll have to see, basically, because of the election.
There's a purity, isn't there, about TikTok? Is that it didn't seem to be plagued with unnecessary ads, and there was the fact that you really could just post anything up there, and it almost had a great respectability amongst people. I mean, obviously, I have never used it. I do. No, but it's just that I only do one thing, which is Twitter. But there's no alternative, is there? Sorry, June.
And Cindy, thank you both. We'll see you in the 11 o'clock hour. Thank you both.